And I
I'll
will,
be right
then I
back.
will, then I will repeat it. Originally, I thought it was just going to be people that I knew very well. So I appreciate you, Todd, for being here. And I started to say that I was going to record something first because the truth is, I don't know what I'm going to say until it comes out of my mouth, which is something that I've chosen to remain doing by design, because to me, that's part of being in the moment, within reason, of course. So what I decided that I would do is just go back to right before I sent out the invitation for people to come to this workshop. We that's fine, Todd. Thank you. It's okay if you have to leave. Um, we had been on a call with Scott, and Scott had really been very vulnerable and said what his real passion would be. And the OGM community on the call around him all jumped in and said, "Oh, we want to help you do this." And while he was speaking, I was reflecting on what I have always wanted to do and do want to do. And what I realized is that people have forgotten how to play, and they've diminished the importance of playing. And that's something that I'm really good at. And so, I say all the time, I don't read a lot of books. I learn in other ways, but I do pay attention to titles. And one title that I remember is Everything That I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And that really struck me because in kindergarten, we're focused on socializing and growing good humans. And as soon as we move over into the professional world, we're focused on good profits. And I think that's where the imbalance comes in. So, to get back to when I initially sent out the request, this is what was going on in my mind. I had created a document and it was called Game B, the making of the game. And I had shared it with some people. Jessie mentioned it because she immediately saw how I was using triangles to create a community based economy, but to be able to track the flow and to move us from being non transactional. The purpose of my call was not about this game, but I'm mentioning it because one of the things that I caught myself doing was focusing on how I can get the most triangles. And that's when I was like, oh my God, like capitalism has really gotten into our psyches. And it's not just capitalism, it's power in general. So on other calls, we were focused a lot on an imbalance between masculine and feminine energy. And I really would like to have different language so that we don't have to keep saying, oh, everybody has both masculine and feminine. Like, I'd like it to be a given. So, Rob sent me an email asking me what this workshop was going to be about. And that made me think, all right, I got to have some kind of idea what this was about. So let me first say that when I designed the game, it was so that everybody would have a coloring board to play in. It was just the outlines and everybody would have a place to plug in their project. But it was also for me. What did I need to help me? And when I realized that it wasn't to collect triangles, I remembered, what is it that I want? I want a community that I feel safe in. I'd love to be able to share some of my writing sometimes because I write very brief things, but what I write is really important and I use my words really carefully. What else did I want to do? Anyway, so I decided that, all right, well, what I want to accomplish from this first meeting is number one, to introduce a new metaphor. And that has to do with words. And what I'm going to do is in the chat, I'm just going to put my private notes in there just so you can wait, control C, wait a minute, control. How do I do this? Control V. Okay.
There you go.
Uh, so those are just my private notes, but they set a framework. So it's sort of like when you would go into your elementary school classroom and there'd be like new terms on the board. So what I wanted
Um,
this, go ahead.
uh, Stacey, you may need to change the access on the document because I got a little prompt that says you need to request access. So if you go up to sharing in the docs file, if you make it so that it's visible to anybody with the link in the permissions, you can also do this after, but if you want us to look at the document now,
Yeah.
you're going to have to change the settings.
So tell me again. So I'm
Yep.
going to, okay, right now it says anyone with the link.
Yep. And then copy
I'm
that.
very proud of myself. I brought my laptop so I can.
Sweet, sweet. So copy that link and paste that into the chat for us. It should, if you've, it should give us different permissions.
Oh, really? I have to redo it now? Oh, okay, wait a minute. So
So if you got to the dialog that says anyone with the link
see if
can
that
view,
works.
you're good. Yes, we're in. Good.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Perfect.
you. So what I had explained to Jessie, who was really helpful to me, she actually created another document where she asked me lots of questions, and I didn't feel like I was defending a dissertation. I felt like curiosity was asking me the questions that would enable both of us to work together. So anyway, so with that, I had to ask myself, well, what do I want out of this? And I got to look at my own document. Um, so I didn't really care, like, I don't really care what I talk about when I come to a space, as long as it has certain things, certain elements in it. And by the way, today I heard something saying, and I wrote it at the bottom, what do we need to heal? We need courage, consistency, and a community that holds us accountable. And that's really all I'm looking for wherever I go. But anyway, some of my passions have to do with deep conversations, words, and then actually making things and, coming up with creative ways to do it. So very briefly, the one metaphor that I wanted to introduce that I think works really well with the mycelium network and all the nature things is this idea of words. And I won't go into all the reasons why I think it's important, but I do think that it will help to balance the masculine and feminine energy, even whether we're talking about a situation, an individual, or a group. I think it will allow us to talk about things in terms of proportions instead of numbers, which is really important to me. So let's see what I put here. All right, I'm just going to skip because as far as the words go, the idea was, and I'm using this in a novel that I'm writing, which words affect our environment and they eat up our space. So I want people to conserve their words. I want them to speak responsibly and to encourage reading, which, as I said, for me, reading is work. But I know how important it is to encourage reading. I want the idea that when you're reading, you're actually cleaning up your environment. You're doing something positive. On the other hand, I want you to recognize when you're using a lot of words, you are taking up a lot of space. You're taking up air and resources that maybe other people need and can use. So that was part of it. Right now, I'm going to end by just saying that one of the tricks, and my life is about finding little hacks for myself. So I custom design these hacks for myself. They won't necessarily work for everybody, but sometimes people can take parts of them and customize them for themselves. So when I was sitting around saying, well, how am I going to organize all my thoughts? I mean, I have 60 plus years of thoughts that I'm now trying to connect and bring into one space. Well, as I've said before, I go by the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. And I believe in going back to basics, which is ABC. So you'll see on the bottom, I wrote, I'm shifting the TM, which of course that means trade, but the computer decided that I meant trademark. I really meant the toxic masculine, which has a counterpart in the toxic feminine, which we all have all of. And I started with ABCs. So everything I do really focuses on looking at authority, bias, and curiosity and trying to bring balance to those things. And you'll notice that there's another word, safety, and that's because it starts with an S for my name. And I always try to bring myself into the play. So I will stop now and open up for questions because it was going to be dependent on who showed up, what I did. Initially, I figured it's going to be maybe Jerry and Ken and a couple of, the other male regulars that I feel like a friendship with. And I was going to go into a deep conversation that probably would have shocked them a little bit. But then, well, not just put on this, I just was going to put you on a spot just a little bit. And I have to say, it was a fascinating process for me when other people said they were going to come. And I was like, I was really grateful because first of all, I know that everybody here, I feel like everybody here is really here to support me, regardless of why. And I really appreciate it. And I just want to say that's the last time I want you to only come because you want to support me. If I ever really need it, I will ask you directly because part of the way I think people should play is just because they genuinely want to. And I believe with all my heart that we can be as productive, if not more productive, if we stick to that. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to say, whatever audience comes to me, it'll be either because they want deep conversations, which I love being a part of doing. They'll want to talk about language and words, maybe create our own Pig Latin. I started thinking, how did Pig Latin even get created and why? And how helpful could it be to us? And I think it could be really helpful, along with the idea of using metaphors, which are much more open and can bring more people in together. I don't know, I'm a cow person, Jerry.
They could have needed a secret language to communicate while overthrowing the human regime.
Yeah. And the other conversation, the other part, which is missions and strategies, again, that has to do with people that want to play. I remember, Jerry, when me, you, and Pete used to meet sometimes, and in my head, I remember you saying, "So are we ready to put on a show?" And I was like, "Yes, this is my troupe. We're ready to put on a show." And I have so many different ideas, but that would be for people that want to do it. And, it would be custom to what they want to contribute. And that's what I'm good at, finding a way to fit everybody in and all the pieces in. So I will stop now. I will thank you for coming. I will open it up for any kinds of questions you may have. And then we'll see what happens.
Sounds lovely. Anybody who wants to run with this in any direction is welcome to do so. Go ahead, Todd. It looks like you want to.
Yeah. Stacey, we've shared space before, but I know we haven't had a lot of interaction, but I've always enjoyed my interaction when I have been with you. The words are drawing me in. You spoke of words related to play. You spoke of Pig Latin. You spoke of conserving your words. And there's something I'm sensing that you want to go further with words, and I would like to know what that is.
Okay, so that is definitely something I want to do with all the word people. So like Doug Breitbart, he's a word person. He really, like, we can talk about this and play with this. I have convened a word call. Basically, I think that, okay, how do I explain this? I feel that if we were to blend the right types of words together, we would avoid a lot of conflicts and at the same time attract the right people. And what I mean by that is most solution seekers, it seems they're looking to change the behavior in other people. I don't want to do that. I want to help the right people find the space that they belong. And the way I assess that is by listening to the language they're using. That's like a guide. So I like using a lot of food metaphors, and I like using the metaphors that go with an acting troupe. and I try to blend those. I also use I like being clinical. So those are the three that I use. Whereas I try to move to the side the army metaphors, and even like with science fiction. So to me, science fiction, I blend it because I call it fantasy, because that's the blend of the fairy tales with the science fiction. And I try to bring that energy into balance, and I call it fantasy. So it's really looking at words as if they are the most important thing. And to some degree, I really think they are.
So one example, Stacey, I I feel what you're saying. One example is I'm tired of the masculine feminine language divide. And so Pia, my partner, and I have been playing with moon and sun. And moon as masculine and sun as feminine. Because in tantric traditions, the feminine is the source of life. So it fits more with the sun. And it kind of twists me around to have masculine a replacement for moon, and it gives a little space for playing. But one of the things I don't like about, let's call it moony language, is the declarations. So the type of energy that is not about inquiry, that is not about enjoying the flow of language. It's more about making a declaration, standing in that declaration. And there's a place for that, but it's loud right now. There's a lot of declarations right now. And part of what I'm feeling you say is, I love the inquiry. And can we have the inquiry without a series of declarations and then arguments over which declarations are superior?
Yeah, thank you. And I want to continue on that, but not now, because that's the point. Like, so you and I could think of a whole bunch of other people that would really want to be in that conversation. But at the same time, I can imagine that there are people here that that's not their first and favorite thing to do. And I want everybody to be doing their favorite thing. Like, not, yes, sometimes we stretch a little bit, but we don't have to stretch, and we could still be part of the same community, just entering at different times. Like, I don't go into some of the really, really deep conversations about technology because that would just bore the hell out of me. I want to be at the before conversations, where everybody's milling around. Gee, which conversation do I want to be a part of? But I love that. And I do want to continue it, especially that whole sun and moon thing, because even as you're saying it, it's triggering thoughts in me. But I want to come back to it because I think it's so much about, and I will definitely have another call and we'll see what's good for you. And everybody's always invited, but it's up to them if they want to come. And that's why I say I appreciate the support, but I never want somebody coming just to support me unless I ask them, because I'm a big girl and I know how to ask for help. And I will ask for help because it's a strong and brave thing to do. Thank you. Ken?
Thank you, Stacey. One of the things I do is the way I hold words is that every word has a swarm of definitions, and most people only see a few little bees in the swarm. So, for example, when I was doing workshops on conflict, I would ask people, I'm going to give you a stack of Post-its and some part markers, and I want you to write down all the words and short phrases that occur to you when you think of conflict. And then I have them put it up on the wall. Now, I did this at Yosemite, and there were 35 people in the workshop, and there were 400 people, 400 different things people wrote. And my favorite one was organ failure. I said, who wrote organ failure? Someone raised her hand. I said, what does that mean? She said, that's when I'm so afraid of the conflict, I'm afraid we're going to have a heart attack. And I said, how many people had organ failure as their definition of conflict? And nobody except her. And I said, how many people see it now? And they all went, totally, right? So it's not about who's got the right definition. It's let's get our definitions out and recognize that because of shifting contexts, there's lots of different ways of interpreting any given word. And if we can hold that as, in this context, you're holding that word this way, but in a different context, you might hold it something else, it starts to loosen the hold that words have on us. And I'm reading this book right now called Hospicing Modernity, and she talks about this process of wording the world, which is when we try to make the world conform to our definitions of it, which it will never do. And so I think you're really onto something here with, words are incredibly important. We live in language. Language creates our worlds for us. And if we can pry open a little bit of the doorway to allow words to have more meaning for us and to recognize that someone else uses the word in a very different way than we do, and that's okay as long as we get that's how they're using it. So if I'm going to be in this conversation, I want to try to use it in the same way or introduce a different distinction so that we can broaden the conversation rather than argue over who's got the right thing. And I always struggle with masculine and feminine. I come out of a Taoist tradition. So for me, it's yin and yang, which is receptive and active. And there's always receptive and active in everything. You can't have an action without some reception, right? You can't have reception without some action. So that, for me, starts to broaden the conversation around that.
Yeah.
And if you only focus on the active, that's the toxic masculine. It's just about action, And if you only focus on the reception, that's the toxic feminine. There's always got to be, how are these two interacting? And that creates a very different conversation.
Yeah. And if I could just share one thing before I go to Judy. The other piece about focusing on words that isn't so obvious is that those discussions are how we really get to learn about each other in a safe way. In what world would that woman have admitted in front of 400 people that she has anxiety attacks? And just having that out there must have changed the energy dramatically. I can only imagine. So again, it's starting with a word, but it's really as a way to open things up and for people to be able to show up exactly as they are. So, Judy?
I was just kind of to raise an additional dimension, which is the framing of questions, because for me, I'm curious about virtually everything. But there's a sort of a why is this happening or how is this happening? And that's an additional dimension of the choice of words. And I said, I don't want to put it out as a separate construct, but that query process, I think, is really important to sharing understanding.
100%, 100%. And again, so when I made the little list of who would be interested, and I said, I don't have it in front of me, but I said, people interested in words, people interested in humor, people that, have because I like to use like song titles or, what do you call it? What do you call like the taglines for advertising?
Taglines.
Taglines.
There's another.
There's another term, yeah.
Yeah. Well, whatever, not slogans, but I just like to play with those kinds of things just because they're fun, but they also create a container that leaves a lot of room. So, people sometimes say, oh, well, if you use that abbreviation, like I have GOT on one of my documents, and my friend said, well, what is that? I was like, Game of Trust, because that's one particular game that I have. And she said, oh, I thought it was Game of Thrones. And I said, and that's perfect, because both crowds are the crowds that I want to be able to speak to. Those crowds actually, there is enough commonality between them. So I like sometimes that there's double entendres because they can work. Yeah, I'll stop. Because I love numbers too. So I'm not talking about numbers today. That's for a different group of people because that gets too trippy. Yes, better living through conversations. I love that. Was that General Electric? Wait, is better living through General Electric?
That was actually
chemistry, Dow.
DuPont, better living through chemistry. And GE was we bring good things to life.
Okay.
Which always made me think of the Frankenstein monster.
Yeah.
Like whenever I heard that, I was like, whoa.
Yep.
Which by the way, one of the fun ideas that I would have thrown out to people that just wanted to play was sort of like an Olympiad where we answer these questions like better living through chemistry or whatever, just for fun, but we're still talking. But oh, he had to go. Bye. Yeah, so that's, yes, Judy, I agree. And this is giving me the feedback that I wanted or need to have more of these. And if you would want to join with me, because I would really benefit by somebody who's more focused, because that is not my strength.
Well, I'd have to say I'm focused, but I'm multidimensionally oriented all the time.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's so much nuancing in words that even if the two of us use the same word, we might mean something quite different. And so I think somehow bringing that notion of nuance into the conversation about how do we communicate more effectively is something worthy of some additional thought and discussion. And I don't have an answer right now, except that my first response to any statement is kind of a tell me more sort of thing. I'd like to understand this or help me understand whatever. So I think there's a nuancing question because you and I could use the same word and mean rather different things.
Yeah, but I'd love for you to be in the space when we have another call about that, because
I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I'm happy to do that because communication is so important and it's sort of majorly messed up at this point.
Right.
And
So
words
I
are very loaded.
Sure. I purposely, when I put out this invitation, I said an Aikido strategy. Now, I actually had something totally else in mind, which really talks about how we can help people learn how to critically think and where I thought the leverage points were, because I have a lot to say about that. But that would be for a mission-based call where people want to go on a mission, because I do have ideas, but I want to do it in a fun way, but do real stuff. But as far as words, I will definitely convene another call. And what I usually try to do is ask a question that could be taken more than, or use a word that could be taken more than one way and play with it. Like if you notice, Kevin asked me, do you mean this? And I was kind of, my answers are kind of cheeky, or at least they try to be, because I want it to be open. It could be whatever you want. And yet we can all enjoy the same song for 100 different reasons. And I would like to cultivate, not everybody's case. Let me just say, not everybody can. And that doesn't mean that they can't come, but it means it's going to be their choice to adapt and change to the way we're doing things. And to what Todd said before, I do think that using the language of nature and food and the theater kind of draws in the people that it will most likely work with. Not definitely, but most likely. And we each have all the different parts of ourselves. It's just a matter of when that part comes out. And, it's a matter of time and context and where we are. I'm not just one way. I mean, I'm always me, but I'm not always reflecting the same part of me, which is why I didn't want to originally share this, because I'm speaking to people who kind of know me, and it puts things in context. Out of context, it is not a safe thing to do. It just isn't. And I would like to cultivate safe communities. So words are the one thing that I'm very interested in. The other thing I'm very interested, though, is the male thing. In another group, we've really been talking on what we need to do is heal young. For me, as a mother, and I've mentioned before, I have a toxic young male as a son. I have two sons, very, very different. It's hard for me to talk about the younger one, but it's for him that these children, these people that turn into bullies, they're not born that way. And the men in our circles, I find you to be right in the middle. You've mostly all done a lot of your own work. you have a desire to see things balanced, and I'm very comfortable in this group. But we can always, everyone, like I said, I had to notice that I was collecting triangles. It's like we still need a community to reflect things back to us. And Ken, I was interested, you had said something about a group, and I don't know if I had skimmed it and reading it, or I had walked out of the room and heard it, because I didn't get the full thing, but you were talking about a group of men, and it was like a men only, and you were working on whatever it was. And I was thinking, to have one woman in the room, it would make you vulnerable, but it might be really important. And interestingly enough, I said in the beginning that originally I thought it was going to be like a handful of men that were going to show up. The minute a woman said they were going to come, my first thing is, oh, I can't do that to these men in front of the woman. It would embarrass. And I was like, oh my God, if it were a group of women and a man came, I would have never thought, oh, they're not going to be comfortable. So it's like all of us need help catching ourselves. And I mean, in many ways, those of us in this room, we're more similar than different, but our differences are important and valuable.
Stacey, what you're referring to is my last post in the Plex. I'm working on a project right now with a group of men around the meta crisis. And it's very intentional that we chose white men. And it comes from something called Traces of the Trade, which is a movie that I saw many years ago about the town of Bristol, Connecticut was entirely based on the slave trade, and became a very, very wealthy town, one of the richest towns in America. And this family in the 1990s decided they really wanted to look at the legacy of slavery and how it impacted them. And it split the family apart. A bunch of people said, don't do that. And a bunch said, no, we need to do that. And there's a scene where they go to Ghana and they're talking to the African woman in Ghana. And she says, it's very honorable what you're doing, but you're not ready to come talk to us. You're looking for us to tell you what to do. You need to go do your own work. And so we chose white men of privilege specifically to examine our privilege and our arrogance and our unconsciousness before we take this out and start talking with women. So you're absolutely right. Having women would very much change it. But we want to make sure that before we start talking, we've kind of looked at ourselves and said, where are we unconscious? Where are we arrogant? Where are we privileged? How does that show up? How can we be more aware of that? So when we're listening to women, we can not be as reactive. We can be in a better listening mode. So that was a very, very intentional thing. It wasn't to exclude women at all. It's to get ready to talk to women.
And I was not suggesting women. I was suggesting one woman, because if you're all unconscious about the same thing, how are you going to show each other where you're unconscious?
First, we need to know. We need to explore ourselves before we can invite anybody else in. So that is in the plan. That's down the road, but
Yeah,
it would not have worked to start that way.
got it.
I want to say something else though, which is the way I hold language is made up of three components: gesture, speech, and symbol. And gesture is the original language. Before we had words, I mean, going back hundreds of thousands of years before we had modern humans with voice boxes, we grunted and we pointed, and it's like, so there's something very powerful about gesture. And there's a process called social presencing theater, where your body has tremendous wisdom, and gesturing really gets at what words mean. So in social presencing theater, they might say, make a movement, form yourself into a sculpture of where you feel stuck. And people go, and then she'll say, all right, now don't think, just let your body naturally go to the unstuckness. All right. And people find themselves moving into different places, and it has a profound effect on the way they think. So changing channels, I know you want to explore words, but sometimes changing the channel to what's the gesture, and then changing the channel to what's the symbol of this. Draw a symbol, draw a picture of what this word means to you, so you can start to really expand out for people what it is they're talking about when they use a particular word. What does this look like if you were to draw a picture of it? Don't worry, it doesn't have to be Michelangelo. Just draw something.
That may work really well for men, but for women who haven't been able to find their voice, I want to use my words. I want to use my voice. I want to fill up that space. You're absolutely right as far as the movement goes. before I got on this call, I had to move around because honestly, I can think so much better when I'm playing and dancing, and you'd be amazed. But I can't do that in this world without looking odd or weird and then putting myself at risk again. So again, I think it's very different. You know, again, I try to keep reminding myself, think like a child, think like a child, think like a child. When I was a child, and I think you might be able to relate, I wanted to try it myself. I want to do it myself, or I can't wait to be a grown up. All of those things. And I try to bring that with me because there are a lot of people that aren't white privileged men that feel those things really, really strongly. And I think when I look at Facebook, I see that playing out. I see a bunch of people who haven't been heard that just want to explode their words wherever they are. So I want to use words responsibly and thoughtfully and find the balance between words and gesture. But I totally agree with you, which is why I prefer to have a call saying what I just did instead of writing it. I wouldn't have been able to write it because I can't be the playful part of me in writing. It's much more difficult.
Makes sense.
But I can be the emotional part in writing,
Yeah.
which the next call I will share something I wrote. Jerry.
Actually, Judy, and then I'll talk.
Well, I was just going to say that one of the distinctions I think is this important is the live verbal content as opposed to the words in print, because the words in print are limiting. They have an implied definition that may actually be quite different between different authors. And so there's a context, again, it's contextual, and the dialogue is essential to clarifying the context and the meaning. And so it's kind of unfortunate that we went to such a written fact-based approach in some ways, because it doesn't invite the dialogue, but it did create book clubs which discuss what the words actually mean. So there's a balance here, and I think doing this live with people is a critical dimension of the topic.
Okay, you just put another item on the stack of things I wanted to put in the conversation. If I can just put a couple quick things in. I long ago I started thinking about language, like our attempts to communicate with each other, as I'm using a very thin straw between us to try to paint an impressionistic version of what's in here in your head. And I'm doing it quickly because words, they float away, and if I'm lucky, I will hit some of the things that resonate for you the way they resonate for me. Otherwise, you're going to interpret it with your worldview and whatever else. And it's very imperfect, and it's what we're stuck with. And it's like what we do constantly. So when I say said earlier in the chat, we're negotiating meaning all the time, that's kind of it. It's like, oh yeah, but I painted this over here. Oh, I didn't mean it that way. I meant more like this. And if we're patient and good at this, we can kind of get pretty good, rich paintings in each other's heads that get better over time, something like that. Then the second thing that struck me as you walked into the topic about speaking in words was the saying, we speak the world into being. And then I Googled it while we were sitting here talking, and to my horror and dismay, all the first page of Google links went to the Bible, and it was about Genesis and how God speaks the world into being. And I'm like, that's not at all my intention of the phrase. My intention of the phrase is it's very metaphysical, and I don't know much Heidegger, but you know, we in how we name, you know, naming, which is kind of where you started, Stacey, how we name things. And a headline that I just saw this morning was about people's names, and how people's names often direct the occupations they take up. You know, carpenters tend to become carpenters, et cetera, et cetera. And that was an occupational surname which came from carpentry, right? Things like that. Then I love anybody who's pointing to our lack of play and humor. Got my vote. I think that's like super important, and I try to make most interactions playful if it's appropriate. In some settings, you know, people are being really serious, that you can either crack the ice and get levity in the room, or just blow it if you're not appropriately serious. But I remember the difference between childishness and childlikeness, being childish versus being childlike.
Right.
And childish is sort of the value judgment of that was like an immature behavior or something like that. But being childlike is this thing I think we strive to a lot. We want to be childlike in our perceptions of the world and our responses to other people, things like that, because children are unfiltered. We haven't socialized out of them the natural ability they have to see the world and connect and understand and all that kind of thing. And then the last thing from Judy's comments right now, one of my favorite books back when was Leonard Schleyn's The Alphabet versus the Goddess. And his thesis, which he tries to prove by going around cultures around the world, his thesis is that the advent of the linear alphabet changes how we think and how we relate. And his most compelling argument is he goes to ancient Greece before the alphabet and after the alphabet. And he says, before the alphabet, you have Diana, goddess of the frickin' hunt. And you have Pan and Bacchus and a whole bunch of sort of early Greek deities. And their birth story of the world is one of evenness between male, female, characters and all of that. Then you get the written alphabet, and all of a sudden you have men giving birth from their head and their thigh, women being relegated. And part of what he says is the shift to a linear alphabet also eliminated a lot of imagery from our lives, that it kind of made secondary the pictures and images that we used to use as I think pretty primary ways of communicating. So the thesis is really super interesting, and it influenced me a lot. Although I don't know that he proves it perfectly, and I'm tempted to ask Claude, hey, what's happened to Leonard's thesis in Alphabet versus Goddess? Has it been supported or weakened over time or something like that? But that would be interesting because I'm so curious about how that plays out.
Well, it was also exclusive. I mean, think about why they didn't allow slaves to read, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, and it was okay to bring the Bible into the South as long as he didn't teach Jubilee and a couple other things. You had to hands off Jubilee. Don't be telling people that every 7 years we clear the books and free the slaves.
It's funny that you bring up the Bible because so I use questions just as sort of like a filtering process. So I like speaking to people that are religious because I will speak in their language. I just need to know that they're aligned with what they're saying. So my question is to those people who believe that the Bible should be taught in school, do you also believe that it should be questioned and critically evaluated?
Nice.
If they say yes, I'm all up for that conversation. Matter of fact, that is a conversation we should be having. But go ahead.
I have a draft post that I'm afraid to post, but I've written a part of it, and it's a quiz I give people. Like I ask people, hey, do you know what the second commandment is? Now, there's only 10. Do you think they'd be really important?
Thou shalt
So
have
what's
no other God before me, or a graven image.
that's number one.
Yeah.
Graven image.
Graven
And
image.
nobody, and 1 in 10 people knows it. Very few people know no graven images. And the 10 commandments aren't exactly consistent across sects and everybody else, but by and large, no graven image is number 2. And I'm like,
So,
first of all, no
can we even
graven,
name all of them? I'm
no
just, I
graven
mean,
images.
I'm sorry.
Sure,
I have
I'll pass
no
you.
background. I'm just wondering how many, I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely couldn't give the order, but I'm just curious if we could even figure out what all 10 are. I mean, I'm thinking there's something about bearing false witness.
Right, false
Somewhere in
witness
there.
against thy neighbor, coveting thy neighbor's wife, thou shalt not kill. But the first 3 are all, and I've argued with Gil about this a lot because Gil has a
Oh,
very different
good.
interpretation on this,
Yes.
this deep rabbinical traditions. But the first 3 sound like a really insecure God. Thou shalt have
Bingo.
nobody before me, no graven images. And I can't remember the third one. What is it, Jerry?
I'll look it up in a
Look it
sec.
up. But it's like, and then keep the Sabbath day holy.
Yeah. Yeah. So here are the 10
That's
commandments.
probably
Let me
about
read
as
them
much
off.
as I can do.
Let me read them off. 1, no other gods before me. 2, no graven images. 3, don't take the Lord's name in vain.
Right. Don't be
4,
calling me out, man.
4 is keep the Sabbath holy. 5 is honor thy father and mother. 6, don't murder. 7, adultery. 8, don't steal. 9, don't bear false witness. And 10, don't covet. But don't take the goddamn Lord's name in vain. Oops.
You're gonna be smited.
So yeah, or smoted, smitten. I don't know what the right
Smitten is a little different.
conjugation is. Smitten is such a good word. I love smitten. So anyway, I'm nervous about posting it because I don't really want to like poke the hornet's nest, but they're busy trying to drive the Ten Commandments into schools right now. And I want to arm people with that's great. When they show up and insist on this, just say, hey, what's the second commandment? And what's up with Christianity violating the second commandment constantly? And it's because they made a little mental dispensation. They sort of separated and said, oh, no, no, no. When Christianity does it, it's serving this other function. It's not violating the command. I'm like, no, that's just complete bullshit because I can walk into any mosque or temple on the planet today and they will not violate it.
It's very funny that you bring this up because my initial Aikido kind of thing that I wanted to talk about that had to do with critical thinking really what it was really about is one of the places that I thought we could make some impact had to do with the spiritual community, and it had to do with what I've been seeing on YouTube, which is a mixture of New Age and Christianity blending in, and how some of these readers and channelers, while I believe they are very well meaning, because I've studied a lot of them and I'm just going by my own intuition, but they're doing the same things that we've done over and over and over, which is teaching by telling and implanting ideas. And it even got to a point where I was like, oh my God, it's soon you'll be able to like pay someone to pray for you and manifest your ideas. Like there's this whole capitalistic flow within those communities. But the important point is that that's where I believe a lot of the conspiracies really took root. And so that was for a separate thing for people that were specifically interested in that. But how do I say this nicely? So
Don't worry about it, just say it.
Yes,
no,
out
I'm
with
just
it. Out with it.
years ago, I was president of a condominium association. And in order to become that, we first had to throw out a corrupt board, which I first had to prove was corrupt. And anyway, long story short, we did it. And I remember the woman said to me, she was like, oh my God, you're like a genius, because I literally staged things in the way that Donald Trump would stage things. And I spoke about him, even though it was before he was actually running. Was he running it? No, it was way before that. But he was still on the scene with the birth certificate. And I said to her, I said, I think just like him. I just use my powers for good and not evil. And that's like, I wish I didn't, it sounds terrible, but I do feel like I know exactly how he thinks. I've been surrounded by enough people that are part of a darker underworld than most of the people in these circles have been exposed to. And so my mom was a very not trusting person, and she was very good at reading people. So I learned by watching her and what she pointed out. And my dad, who did not have a formal education and had to always figure out a way to make money, was always looking for the angle. So I'm very good at that. And I remember years ago when they were like, well, we don't want to teach people these things because then they'll do the bad things. And the truth is, the criminals already know all the bad things. You need to teach everybody so they can look out for that. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is because if we were to engage in an activity, if there were people that wanted to do that, that would be the community that I'd really want to target. Like I said, there's different kinds of religious people, and some are really well-meaning, and they kind of get a smack in the face. I mean, I openly say all the time, I believe in a creator God, but I also think I'm a piece of that creator God. So I would take those 10 commandments and rewrite them, recognizing that I have to find the God in me to be a part of this great God. And you guys would laugh hysterically if you ever heard the conversation that I had with the pastor across the street from me. It was quite entertaining. It was lovely, though. It was lovely. But I'll stop there.
That's cool. Other thoughts?
Closing thoughts.
So Stacey, what's your plan going forward? How are you going to unfold this thing?
Well, I think the first thing I'm going to do is plan a call for words, because I already found 2 people that seem very interested, and some other people that are, I think I'll start there. I try to just do one thing at a time, and that one thing usually goes in 3 different directions, which is wonderful, because that's actually how I'd like to see things happen. Ramsey, you want to say anything? I know you were distracted, but
Yeah, I have been completely distracted with sorry. I'm trying to
It's
I
okay.
wanted to listen, but I've only caught things here and there. I apologize. I can't really contribute much. But I'd like to listen to this later if possible.
Well, Jerry, we can post it, because I didn't say anything too crazy. I
Okay,
don't think
I'm
I
sorry.
I don't think I did.
Okay. So you mean post it into the like the OGM
Sure.
Mattermost
Sure.
channel as I usually do?
Yeah.
Because
And
then
this
that'll
way,
still be within the community of people, you know.
right. And hopefully you guys have my back.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then maybe people will be interested. And here's the thing. If somebody wants to take something and initiate it on their own, that's even better. Like, that's what I want, just seed the ideas, and I'll just come back and play in the garden later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In the spirit of wordplay, there's a new word game out that got bought by the Atlantic. It's called Bracket City. And I don't know if you need to have an Atlantic subscription now to play it. I don't think you do, but I have one, so I go in naturally, so I don't know. But Bracket City is really fun. What it does is it's a word puzzle with a short paragraph of clues that are within brackets, within brackets, within brackets. And you always solve the inner one that's highlighted. So the thing usually shows you 2 or 3 things at any one moment that need solving. And the clues are very cute. The clues are sometimes like, oh, it means this kind of sandwich, not that kind of sandwich, or whatever. Like you have to really rely on double entendres and other kinds of things. And some of them are very punny. And then some of them are just cute because there'd be this long clue that collapses to the word ink or something like that, which is a syllable in a longer word for the next clue, right? But I like the elegance with which it works, and then you start doing them, and at some point you solve them without making any mistakes. Like you type in no errors, and you get all the clues, and you're like,
Well, you might like my game of trust document, because, and I'll just say it here, what it entails is us forming like teams. Could you imagine if we had like little teams and then we played some of these games together? Sort
oh
of
yeah,
like, color word. I think that'd be fun.
be good.
And fun has good byproducts. That's what we have to remember.
So one of my favorite phrases on fun is hard fun, and it comes out of people who were thinking about education and kids and all that, and they say kids love hard fun. They don't want like the gimme. They want to chew on something. They love the excitement of the chase, all that kind of stuff. They don't have endless patience, and patience it varies by sort of the kid's character, but also just by maturity maybe. But the notion that things should be hard fun. So one reason why I bought the domain thebigfungus.org a couple of years ago is that I think that the task of sense making together should be hard fun. And mycelial metaphors, which I love, and I think Judy loves as well, and might be a common playful thread that connects us here, are a fun way of thinking about how do we make how do we share knowledge and make the world a little bit better place.
Well, one of the things that I really love to do for fun is guess. I love to guess, and then we check it out, and then we see who's right. So, Judy,
That's
I'm
cool.
sorry I cut you off.
That's okay. It's just a random thought to add to the list, but humor in words would be a subtopic that would be really intriguing, I think.
Like British town names. Who gave them license to be so damned funny? The Slaughters, Upper Slaughter and Lower Slaughter.
A few years
You know.
ago, there was a thing on Facebook of make up town names from Massachusetts.
Ah,
And so my contribution was scrotum down next to apple.
that's really good.
Very good, Ken. Somehow I'm not surprised that you found that, but I'm
I know,
very,
I know. It's just
That's a good one. That's a good one. And nobody loves puns like Ken.
I think a
I
lot of
love
people love
puns.
puns like I do, but
Yeah,
that's
I
another
know a
story.
lot of punny people. That's
Yeah.
who I'm reaching out to, the punny people.
Ken is a pundolator.
Pun it, as
Yeah,
opposed to a poet.
yeah,
Punnet
yeah.
and a poet.
See, and that's where I would point out you should take the D out of pundit, but because
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
I'm trying not to be blue here. You know, I have different versions of my comedy shtick, but
Oh, good.
getting rid of
Depends
the
on,
D.
depends on the audience.
Getting rid of the D.
My first job was in Disneyland on the Jungle Cruise, where you had to memorize a spiel. And, every now and then a supervisor would ride with you to make sure you weren't deviating from the spiel. But some of the ride operators, had their uncensored spiel for grad night or whatever else. And they'd kind of check out and see who was in the boat, and then they'd go crazy. And I didn't get to hear many of them, but you can imagine in Disneyland, the effect would be pretty strong. Go ahead,
I'm
Judy, you
always,
were saying something.
I was just going to say, I'm always intrigued by the extent and complexity of humor itself, because it's so invitational if it's done properly. It opens the topic up in ways that you couldn't do with standard communication.
Mm.
But the whole world doesn't like humor to the same extent I do.
I'm always amazed at how quickly things appear. So if you remember the 1986 World Series, when the ball went between Buckner's legs, I lived in Boston at the time. The next day I went to work and someone said, "Did you hear that Buckner got hit by the T?" which is the public transit. I said, "Oh no." I said, "It's okay, it went between his legs." I'm like, how did that appear like 12 hours after the game? Like, boom, it's right there. Like it's really interesting to me how that shows up.
It's good.
I just want to add one thing and then I'm ready to get off. You guys can stay, but one of the questions that Jessie had asked me when she was comparing the game that I had designed, she was like, how is this different? And she was talking about, the importance of building trust. And what I pointed out is that this is different because I'm starting with where the trust already is. I'm not, you don't play with people, you don't trust, like there's no reason to. Like you're already with them because you want to be with them and you have a sense of trust. So you're not looking to create it out of nothing. It's already there.
Yes, and sometimes play is the way to break the ice with people you don't know at all, and
Right.
to build some trust.
You totally build it. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is,
Yeah.
so let's say I have a certain degree of trust with you. Now you bring somebody else in to play the game. There's already going to be a certain bonding or relation. It's like a relationship starter, for lack of a
Right.
better word. And the agenda is really to get along with that person and to build that trust. Whereas when you enter a different type of situation and you're trying to do something, the emphasis isn't really on the same things. And, I want to build a sustainable flow of values around a community that only requires presence. And I think that it can be done, and I think could be a lot of fun. So anybody that wants to reach out to me or do their own thing and wants me to join them or whatever it is, let's do it.
Presence? I'll go anywhere if there's presence around.
Presence, your presence is my present.
Sounds
Awesome.
good.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, Stacey, thank you very much. Thanks for convening this conversation. Love it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao for now.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Judy. Yep, good luck moving.
Thank you.